Welcome to Planetary Health First, Mars Next. It is going to be an amazing journey today. Hope you're ready for liftoff. We are live now.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us here on Planetary Health First, Mars Next. We have an amazing guest, Dr. Pierantonio Russo. And if you could just share with our audience just a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Hey, good evening. Again, my name is Pierantonio Russo. I am the Chief Medical Officer at Eversana. Eversana is a life science organization. It is international. We have several offices in the US, in Europe, in Asia as well. Think of Eversana as a pharma company, but without a pill. What it means is that we help various organizations in the pharma space, but also in the device manufacturing business to launch new treatments for patients who are in various therapeutic areas. We interact with our clients, again, at the international level, in various phases of the in the various phases of launching the treatment, from the initial launching to the even post-launching. To that, in that respect, whenever we need to develop real-world evidence of how the medication or the device performs in practice, we are able to then provide both the doctors, the public, and the manufacturer with the evidence that may of how in clinical practice the asset performs, which may be different from the clinical trial. My experience is in clinical experience and academic experiences in cardiac surgery. I practiced cardiac surgery and heart transplantation for more than 20 years. Started at the Mayo Clinic in this country, in Rochester, Minnesota, and then in Philadelphia, where I was the chief cardiac surgeon at two medical centers, particularly focusing on transplantation and surgery for congenital heart disease, mostly in children. Then I moved to the industry more recently as medical director at Independence Blue Cross, and then with the RWE system in Boston, where I was also lecturing population medicine at the Harvard Medical School. My role in my organization is to translate clinical and health economic knowledge into actionable analytics, particularly leveraging the deep analytics and the machine learning and the artificial intelligence that today allow us to provide the that evidence that is based on multiple data points and the multiple inputs.
Wow, that's awesome. And if you ever need any assistance going to Italy, I'm happy to help you with your baggage, your luggage, any logistics, as long as you take me, okay?
Absolutely. We do have offices there too.
Yeah, that's not, you are probably everywhere. It sounds like Eversana is got lots of offices. I know you have a Chicago office here, and probably, I don't know how many offices, maybe
about 20 in the US, and one in London, one in Switzerland, one in Milan, and other offices are opening up in Italy as well. And then in Asia, we have a large presence in India as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, today we're going to talk about AI in healthcare. And I'm super excited about this because as Dr. Russo has been sharing, he's really leading the charge with rare disease, which is really, we'll find out more from him about how they've been using AI, I imagine, to lead the charge in that. So without, do you want to start with just giving us a little background with AI in healthcare? Would that be a good starting point?
Absolutely. I think that everyone now has heard the word AI, artificial intelligence, but as a concept, artificial intelligence really started in the 50s. And what is it, artificial intelligence? Well, the concept of artificial intelligence was introduced by Alan Turing in England, when essentially he indicated that any machine that act and think in a way that is indistinguishable from a human being, it has artificial intelligence. And obviously that was a concept that eventually was pursued by Alan Turing, as well as other investigators and mathematicians and computer science individuals. And it is really that it is an area of computer science that, again, produces machines that try to simulate the human brain, human intelligence, and even now the human behavior. Obviously, it took time to develop from the concept into applications, because one of the things that was missing in the 50s, of course, was the computer power and the speed that we have today. But once computer power and speed started to reach the levels that we have today, then we realized that the multiple data points that are available, particularly in healthcare, could be manipulated by the machines. And this area of computer science that intersects somehow with statistics, right, allow us now to put together all the various data points and identify the threads that keep them together. And so we can identify trends, we can identify clusters, and we can even make sense at the events that are typical of a patient journey, to the point that we are very close to establish methods that even determine the causality between events. So is this disease, this event, caused by a certain external problem, or by genetics, or by a combination of the two? So this is what artificial intelligence is. Now, how does artificial intelligence then essentially be actionable in healthcare? Well, the way it does is through various capabilities. So one capability is the ability to predict. And the ability to predict is called machine learning. Machine learning is again, an area of artificial intelligence that was described in late 50s. And the concept is that it is based on the fact that the machine, the computer, is able to function and find those connections, those the history of an event, and put together the all the threads without necessarily being programmed. All right, that is called the unsupervised learning. So in other words, you start to say, well, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know how all these data points connect to each other. I don't know the history, but I let the machine tell me what the machine finds in terms of connections, right? So in addition to the computer power, we need to have the ability to use mathematical models and the ability to cluster events and data points in a way that then we can identify, as I say, those associations. Once the predictions occur, then what are we going to do with it, right? Well, Then we have generative AI. So one is predictive analytics, the other one is generative AI. We are now prescribing, we are generating new ideas, new text, and you have now probably many of your crowd here have learned about ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is a generative AI. And it is a generative AI, it is a form of AI, or artificial intelligence, that uses language. And so by reading and learning from large amount of text, literally, the algorithms then develop responses to your questions because they've been trained in learning from a large number of tests and make sense of that test, right? So just to clarify the concept, think of the way we learn how to distinguish between a cat and a dog, right? So we want to tell the machine, this is a cat, I want you to find me another cat, and I don't want you to find a dog, right? So the predictive algorithms are based on first learning from an event, a patient history, a patient disease that we know is what our target is. And then we tell the machine, find me similar events, diseases, connections with that disease, right? Then once we predict, let's say that we predict that the patient is going to develop pancreatic cancer or sepsis, infection. Well, then what are we going to do with it, right? Because we want actionable analytics. We want to then provide the physicians or the patient with decision support mechanisms that, again, are actionable. And think of your chatbots, right? So when you talk to in the computer with when you chat, right, for when you buy something, or you have experience with interaction with a marketer or trying to buy something, right? You have chatbots, right? You are chatting, and you are chatting with an artificial intelligence based algorithm, and that is able to respond based on previous experience with the same questions, right? So that is the generative AI. And then again, you have more complex ways of connecting all the symptoms in a disease, or a certain cluster of events in, like, for example, pandemic, right? So you can predict where the next pandemic may occur based on early symptoms and signs and other triggers that have been proven to be true alerts in the past. And those are the clusters or knowledge graph. Okay.
So let's get into AI with rare disease. So how are we going to use AI in rare disease, which is really important to your work at Evasana? And just, I guess maybe you want to start just sharing a little bit about rare disease, because we don't, of course, they're just for the general audience, and then get into a little more deeper.
Right. So again, at Evasana, we are pursuing precision medicine, and so we are trying to connect the dots to provide the connection between the best treatment to the best patient at the appropriate time, right? And this is obviously true for any condition, but even more important in rare diseases. Why is that? Well, there are about 25 million patients in this country with rare diseases. Rare diseases are those conditions that are triggered by mutations, genetic mutation. There are others which are in a minority, are not triggered by, they are not caused by a genetic mutation. But still, the common denominator the reason why we call them rare is because each of them only include a small number of patients. It can be 10,000 patients, 1,000 patients, maybe 200,000 patients. That's it. And so but the common denominator is the fact that given that out of the 25 million, right, there are 7,000 diseases or more, or 7 to 8,000 diseases. Each of the condition includes only small amount of patients. And because of that, of course, physicians are not, in general, are not well aware of each of the conditions, except, of course, in centers of excellence. And so the problem here is that many of these patients are not diagnosed on time. They are not diagnosed at first pass. Certainly, they are not diagnosed when they first demonstrate the initial symptoms. And a paper that my colleague and I have published in collaboration with the NIH for the study of rare diseases has shown that it may take up to 3 to 5 years before we can actually make in general, a diagnosis, definitive diagnosis of rare diseases, in spite of the fact that now we have genetic testing that in most cases are able to confirm the diagnosis. So what happens is that patients are seen by in the general clinic by pediatrician, by family practice physician, who may or may not be, in general, they are not very familiar with a specific condition. And so they start to treat the symptoms and signs that that particular individual patient manifests. But until you are able to put all the data point and the presentations together, and then go ahead and indeed send the patient for a genetic test, then there is a problem with, of course, the multiple consultations and even delay in diagnosis. So what we have done in rare diseases have been starting to use machine learning in this way. We identify patients who actually have the disease. Those patients have been confirmed. And how do we find those patients? Well, we find them through electronic medical records of patients who have a confirmed diagnosis. We may find them through administrative claims, so administrative data that we find in databases with the of patients who indeed had confirmation with the electronic medical records. So this is the claim analysis that aligns with the finding in the electronic medical records of patients who have been confirmed with that disease. Then we think again about I want you to find me the same cat. Then we use algorithms, the data science work with me, and we design algorithms which allow us to find in the electronic medical records or in claims databases the same characteristics, the same features that are specific to those patients of whom we know the diagnosis is correct. And this is particularly important in situations where the claim does not have the disease does not have a specific claim, does not have a specific code that is usually identified in our administrative claims, or may not have the appropriate label in the electronic medical records, may not have the actual diagnosis in the electronic medical record, but they may have the symptoms and signs, the manifestation, what we call phenotype, that is typical of that condition. And with that, we are able to identify, we're among the few in the country that have had a long history of success utilizing machine learning to identify various patients with various rare diseases. The other way to do it is to identify patients who have been treated with a specific drug, right? That is typical only for that particular population. So in other words, there are drugs that are treating only those conditions. And so if we identify the patients who have been given that drug, then only that drug, then specifically for their disease, then we know that we have the correct cohort of patients with the correct phenotype. And then we find similar patients, again, in electronic medical records, in registries, or even in claim databases.
So you're essentially trying to make rare disease less rare by finding more patients. You're increasing the number of rare disease in some sense using data mining and AI, and then if you will, right? I mean, once you find some, you just go and look out in that universe for more, correct?
Absolutely. I can tell you of an example of a rare condition called MPS 4. This is obviously for many people is an esoteric name, but it's a rare disease, is a devastating condition. But when we started to look at that condition, the question was, can we find similar patients who have not been diagnosed yet? They are still in the phase in which we are treating symptoms. We are trying to treat symptoms, but we can't cure them, in spite of the fact that that condition had indeed now a new therapy. So the way we did it was to identify a small group of patients, maybe 15, 20, who actually had the treatment, had already received that treatment. As I said, that treatment is specific only for that particular group of patients. Once we identify those patients, we compare that group of patients with a control group, which allowed us to identify all the features which are characteristics only of those patients. And those features can be the clinical symptoms and signs, the age of initial manifestations. It can be the type of doctors that they see, all the interaction with the healthcare system, all right? And we then use that machine learning algorithm that I described to identify similar patients who had all the features, all the characteristics of the correct patients, but they were not even identified yet as having that disease. And we found, starting with the 20 that were confirmed conditions with MPS 4, we found an additional 70 patients in our databases, and those patients were actually sent for genetic testing and were appropriately treated. So we had the confirmation.
So this is a very naive question. I am not an expert in rare diseases, but if you take statins, those who have cholesterol, high cholesterol, not to mention any name, or diabetes, which are very common diseases, right, and chronic diseases. Now, when you come from a pharma model, that business model is very different, than a rare disease model. So I imagine from a pharmaceutical or it's the IP, it's the actual applications, right? I mean, this is sort of, forgive me for Pierantonio for being off, but this is just fascinating. I just got this thought that I wanted to ask, is that, are you like the gold, the real discovery in rare diseases is what you can find by that rare individual and the potential for new discoveries that could be applicable to other diseases? Or am I just, or the research, where is it? Because it seems if you take the model, you know that there's so few people, what's the business model in this? And I'm sorry, I know this isn't part of the discussion, but I'm curious.
Yeah, so I mean, for conditions like diabetes or hyperlipidemia, hypercholesterolemia, right? The artificial intelligence allows you, again, machine learning predicting. Let's figure out, first of all, what we want to predict. In that case, for example, it could be who are the patients who are more ideal for a certain statin or an alternative to statin? Who are the patients whose performance outcome is going to be much better with a certain diabetic class of drugs versus insulin, for example, right? And because, as we discussed, the results of clinical trials not always translate 100% well into clinical practice, right? For various reasons. Think, for example, the ability of the patient to be able to afford the medications, affording the copay for those medications. And so if they cannot afford the copay for those medications, even if that medication is ideal, then they don't take it. Or there are adverse events, in which case the patient is not taking them after a while because there are complications. We are talking about statins. How many patients drop from statins because of leg pain, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So what machine learning allows us to do is to connect the best treatment with the best with the best patient, right? And also identify the physicians who are the most suitable to allow that patient to try the appropriate treatment based on preferences, patient experience, ability to navigate the healthcare system, right? We know that the healthcare system in this country is very complicated, and there are factors which are outside the actual clinical domain that impact outcomes. So when you're asking about the business model, well, I think that obviously pharma is looking at, again, precision medicine in a way that you can target the right population and not all population that may try your medication but then drops out because it's inappropriate for that particular group of patients. The right doctor who is able to handle the patient. Hello? Sorry, something happened with my computer. So I was saying that clearly we need to understand the ecosystem, mm-hmm. that where the patient interact with the doctors, interacts mm-hmm. with the ability to pay, with the insurance, with CMS, mm-hmm. And also with the social determinant of health. Right? Okay. We know now how the neighborhood stress, the inability to buy fresh food, right? All of that in the inability to transport, of having transportation, right? Mm-hmm. Difficulty to transport. All that impact on the care delivery system. And so we need to. So in those situations, it's not a question of finding the undiagnosed patients. It's to match the correct treatment for correct mm-hmm. patient with the at the appropriate time in the correct system.
So I feel like you lined up perfectly for this next question, providing and asking an example of precision targeting of patients and physicians. I feel like you were kind of getting into that.
Yes, we do a lot, as I mentioned, we do a lot of precision medicine in rare diseases, but also outside rare diseases. Clearly today, precision medicine means many things, right? To an oncologist, precision medicine may mean that we know the biomarker of a certain lung cancer, and maybe that biomarker may be different in patient A versus patient B, so we are treating them in a different way with target therapy. And thank God, now we're starting to build, we understand the genomic of certain conditions like cancer, and we are building medications, treatments, which are targeting just those cells with those biomarkers. That is one way, in my mind, that is the biological precision medicine. But then there is the care delivery system precision medicine that consists, again, I'll repeat the concept again, right patient, right treatment, right time, right settings. And so let me give you an example. Recently, we realized that the certain patients with a very difficult to treat abnormality of the platelets, which are the little component of the blood that allow us to stop bleeding, right? Had multiple medications available to them, right? But none of them were really effective. And so many patients tend to go through the healthcare system trying different medication, from steroids to more specific medications, some of them being toxic. So the true question is, what medication is good for whom, and who are the doctors who can actually help these patients? And so in this particular situation, this is really a use case that then led to a very successful, even commercial model. So what we did was to identify, in this particular condition of abnormality of platelets, we identify 9 patient persona. 9 patients persona based on their clinical characteristics, their patient journey, in which they showed the ability or they showed the trend to adopt new medications or not, right? And then we established, out of the 9 patient persona, the probability to switch to a new therapy. And of course, the first 3, we ranked them, and we selected the patient persona with the highest probability between 70 and 90%. And then we identified the physicians who had the highest volume in their practice of these patients with the highest probability to switch, right? Because the physicians may be willing to switch, but doesn't have patients whose patient persona meets the characteristics of someone who has high probability to switch. Bottom line is that out of this exercise, we end up with a list of physicians with the highest volume of patients who had the highest probability to switch to a new medication. And in the next 8 months, following us providing the list to the appropriate constituency, the 80% of the new prescriptions came from our list, came from the physicians on our list. So this is an example, actually, that we are going to publish soon. Other example, of course, of using machine learning for public health is another study that we have done on identifying patients with hepatitis C before they actually end up being diagnosed with hepatitis C at the time of when already they are advanced and with liver cancer, with either liver cancer or liver cirrhosis. The current screening algorithms that are available clinically and even by the CDC are not specific enough, and so they don't identify these patients early enough. But we put together a combination of clinical history as well as social determinant of health. Where do we find these patients? Well, of course, we were not shy in saying, look, there are patients in the prison who are not appropriately identified. There are patients in communities with high incidence of substance use disorder, SUD. And the patients who show up with alcoholism, those patients in the emergency room, those are the patients that you want to test, not necessarily anybody who was born in 1960 or 65, whatever the most recent clinical epidemiological screening algorithm dictate. And we're going to publish that paper as well very soon. So there are various applications, and these applications, again, tend to come as close as possible to the dream of precision medicine, which is based on your preference, your genetic, your ecosystem, and of course the goal is to make sure that the clinical outcome is as positive as possible, but also the experience, right? How many patients are in the hospital, people are trying to treat them, but this is not what they want, right? So there are patients who die, patients who are terminal, and they die in intensive care unit, but in fact they would have liked to die at home. So the patient experience together with the ecosystem and the ability to treat that patient as a person, as a unique person, and not as a group of patients with disease.
Well, Dr. Russo, this is great. I see how you are truly making healthcare better. Every day, you're really improving the system. That's really what you're doing. There's so many things that you've shared with the specific examples behind the scenes, making that delivery of care with the doctor, the patient, and the treatment better with your studies.
Yeah, I think that the collaboration between data science, between administrators and clinicians is definitely changing the face of healthcare and the way we are practicing medicine. And so I'm very optimistic, and many other colleagues are as well, that we don't practice like in the past as individual physicians, but we belong to, again, what I call an ecosystem. And that ecosystem allows us to exchange ideas, to exchange data, brainstorm, and most importantly, take the best experience from each of the various disciplines: biologists, pharmacologists, data scientists, computer scientists, engineers, because again, the goal is precision medicine. The same patients with heart failure may want a different type of quality of life, and not being always on diuretics and being forced to be in the bathroom all night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that patient or that patient is now terminal and may not want to go to the hospital all the time just to get rid of fluids. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is, let's try to predict as much as possible even the genetic conditions that, together with the lifestyle and external condition, may actually accelerate the development of certain disease. And this is going to be, not only is possible already for certain conditions, but it's going to be more possible in the future. And again, it requires a multidisciplinary approach to a healthcare delivery system, as opposed to a single physician treating his or her patients on an individual basis.
Well, how does the hospital of the future look like?
That's an excellent question. The hospital of the future definitely is going to be a hospital with less walls. Let's put it this way. Today, we are able to treat patients in the home, even with acute disease. And this is the hospital at home program that started in Johns Hopkins and then in Boston. And the first experiment really started in Boston in 2017 at two organizations. Now, Medically Home is the largest private organizations that coordinate care between the hospital, physicians, and the patient's home. And essentially, if you decide that you want to be treated in the home and you are suitable for the hospital at home, even if you have an acute condition that in the absence of the hospital home would bring you to the hospital, you're going to be treated in the home. How? Telemedicine, remote monitoring, nursing visit, and you're going to see the doctor through televideo daily. So we can transform your room in a home in a hospital room. So why that is important? Well, it's important because again, many patients prefer to stay home instead of going to the hospital. Second, because there is less risk of infection. Third, because it is now proven that patients eat better at home, they move more at home. These are data that have been collected with the hospital home program, and most importantly, with remote monitoring, right? With electronic monitoring of vital signs, right? You can offer care, even specialized care, remotely to individuals who otherwise would have difficulties to have access to specialized hospitals, right? Then the hospitals will the actual hospital will have the ability to connect with a network of specialists, right, remotely. So you're going to have e-consults. E-consults can be through an email, but also can be through a live video. And think about the possibility of connecting a patient in a developing country with one of the best hospitals in the world, which can be the Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Mass General, places in Europe, right? And so the connectivity is going to be another factor. Then you're going to have decision support mechanisms, decision support algorithm at the point of care, so that physicians who have questions, they're uncertain of what to do with their particular patient, will have at his or her disposal the knowledge of multiple physicians, multiple experts, through those machine learning models that I discussed. Because if we identify the best possible care for the best possible in the best possible settings for that particular patient, that knowledge can be translated in a chatbot. It can be translated in a simple decision support and alerts in the electronic medical records. And so the patients will be able to benefit from that knowledge, even if they are in a rural hospital, right? If you, at this point in time, one of the limitation of ChatGPT is that ChatGPT was trained on only on the medical literature, but already there have been several attempts initiated to train or initiative, I should say, attempts and initiative both, to train the machine learning directly from data of patients. So from claims, from symptoms and signs as reported by physicians and nurses in their notes. And then think of how easier it's going to be, and this has started already, to provide the physician with more time to take care of the patient and less time to spend in administration. Think of the ability today for a device, artificial intelligence device, to listen to the conversation between the patient and the physician, being able then to translate that voice into text, and that text will then be reviewed by the physician and then organized by the machine learning and artificial intelligence into a note that it is acceptable to be then absorbed into the electronic medical records. So that today, if you go to your doctor, the doctor or a nurse is typing and taking notes, right? Because they need to document everything. Already we have devices that listen to the conversation, picks up everything in the conversation. So there is, sometimes you forget what was said, right, during that conversation. But instead, the machine learning and the generative AI is able to listen and then translate in a note. The doctor reviewed the notes, add questions, addresses questions that were not necessarily introduced in that note, and then the note is structured in a way that is compatible with the electronic medical records. So the operating room. The operating room is now the operating room block. How you book the patient in the operating room is all manual, but there are now already opportunities to use, again, that machine learning algorithm, learning from previous history of that block. How do we use this operating room? Who is using it the most? How long does it take for this operation in general? And then generate suggestions on how to use the particular block and how to then assign those operating room to each of the physicians who need them, and very early release the block when you realize very early that the patient is not going to show up, or the surgeon is not going to do the surgery the next day. So there are various solutions available already that essentially manages the flow of patients in various parts of the hospital based on previous pattern, and try to predict those patterns and try to improve on those patterns. And again, one of the things that we've not discussed is that the advantage of machine learning is that the machine, again, remember, works without being programmed, right? So if you feed feedback to the machine learn by itself on how to improve the algorithm and the prediction.
Wow, I can see that you might be staying up, thinking, dreaming about this too, as a former cardiologist, and all the applications. This has been really amazing conversation. I really appreciate that you've been here as a special guest on Planetary Health First, Mars Next. We're kind of coming towards the end of our session. Dr. Russo, is there anything that you would like to hit at home with real world evidence or AI, anything that you want to share that just needs to get out?
No, I think that we touched high level on what in general how we are using artificial intelligence today to improve healthcare. Of course, the artificial intelligence will never replace the doctors or the nurses, but the doctors or the nurses who don't use AI are going to be obsolete. And so a nurse who accepts to work with the data scientist in building predictive model that then the nurse can use to be alerted that the patient may end up with sepsis in the next 24 hours is a nurse who is going to improve the care of his or her patients, and of course contribute to the improvement in care delivery system. So, but if those physicians, those nurses who refuse to collaborate with the innovation within the intelligence in healthcare system that we are building, then those people are going to be obsolete. So you are not going to replace your doctor, but you want to find doctors and nurses who embrace this revolution, because it's going to improve the care of the patient by offering the global knowledge that has been accumulated on a certain disease, on a certain condition, at essentially at the point of service wherever you are.
Well, Dr. Russo, this has been amazing, and I would think it would be great if we could have a colleague or someone else that you'd like to have come back in the near future. If there's any other topics that you might want to dig deeper, you're always welcome. We are only as good as the SM, the SEAMs, the people like you, the subject matter experts that come on. We are the voice that really tries to just allow people like you to be heard, so we can learn. We're a community of learners. So we're coming towards that time, everyone, and we're sort of wrapping it up. And give me 1 second. I'm looking for our end note. There we are.
Friends, it has been a great journey today on Planetary Health First, Mars Next. Follow us for more on Planetary Health First, Mars Next. Until next time. Peace be with you.